Now, yesterday, a short article and video appeared on Entertainment Magazine's website about the upcoming Disney Plus Star Wars series, The Acolyte. Though maybe I shouldn't say it was about that show, considering it didn't really talk about the series itself, what it's about, or anything like that. Instead, it was more along the lines of a series of quotes, clearly taken from larger or longer interviews, and considering what they're wearing, it seems like they came from Star Wars Celebration back in April. Either way, the quotes are from some of the actors from The Acolyte talking about the diversity and inclusion the show will feature. In other words, it kind of feels like they cherry-picked some quotes out of context because we don't hear the questions that prompted the responses, and packaged them all together in order to talk about how great and important all of this is, how important it is to see diversity in Star Wars. Which sure is all fine and good. It makes sense you'd see diversity in Star Wars. As I've talked about many times before, Star Wars is a massive galaxy of billions upon billions of planets, many of which have humans living on them. They're basically the most populous species in the galaxy. And so when you consider the variety of human life and everything from appearance to culture that we see on this one planet alone that we see here on Earth, well, it makes perfect sense that when you spread that again across a whole galaxy, that you'd have humans who look and act radically different from each other all over the place. No doubt a galaxy would have a scope and scale of variety among humans far greater than what we see here on Earth. Anyway, my point is that diversity among humans should be a given in Star Wars, though I certainly get that it hasn't always been shown, and I have no issue with it being shown more going forward. Again, it makes perfect sense to see a variety of humans. I just hope we continue to see a wide variety of aliens and alien cultures as well, because that is also a given in Star Wars. All that said, there were some rather interesting things said by some of the actors in these clips, including something from Amanda Stenberg, who is set to be the star of the upcoming Acolyte series, something that was even turned into the headline of the article, as you can see on your screen now, that this upcoming Star Wars show is going to make, or has made, Sci-Fi a safe place for black nerds. And before I play the clip of what she actually said, I do again want to point out that there's no real context here. We don't know what question prompted this response, and she smiles and kind of laughs as she's saying all this, implying she doesn't exactly mean this in the most deadly serious way, or so I assume. In other words, I think she's well intended here and maybe just doesn't use the best wording. Anyway, before I get more into it, I'm just going to play the clip now.
I think our show in particular, I think that when it comes to the world of fantasy and sci-fi in general, it hasn't felt like a safe space always for people of color. And it's been a world that I've always deeply loved and been invested in. So to be in any way, shape, or form a part of the wave that is ushering in inclusion and safety for Black nerds, it's my dream come true.
Okay, so I can't help but notice that there's a really, really strange sort of argument here that she's making. She's saying nerd stuff, like Star Wars certainly falls into, has not been a safe space for black nerds, which is curious when you consider the opposite of safe is danger, right? Which then means she's basically saying or implying that somehow nerd stuff has been dangerous for black people. That liking this sort of thing or trying to find a place in these communities has not only been met with resistance, but some level of hostility. And first of all, if that is true, if these, let's call them nerdy fandoms, are riddled with people who would pose a danger or threat to black people for trying to join them, which let's just say is true for the sake of argument, let's say these fandoms, like Star Wars, in large part reject black people, then how is a show featuring a black lead going to make it safer for them? Wouldn't that actually kind of do the opposite? Wouldn't that just incite the fandom who hates them, who poses a threat to them, and make it even more dangerous? So in a way, doesn't her statement kind of invalidate itself? And look, I'm not trying to be an ass here or twist her words. Again, I think she's well-intended, but words are important, and what she says makes no real sense. You can't say there's some level of danger by being a person that looks this certain way trying to join a community, but by a person that looks that way joining the community, it will solve the problem or make it safer. You're kind of making yourself the hero of your own story, it seems. Which is why I bring this all up. She's putting the burden or blame on the community for her not feeling safe, but doesn't begin to explain how she's not safe or what the danger to her or other, as she calls them, black nerds really is. Nor does this danger seem to have stopped her from not only being a huge fan all these years, but it also didn't stop her from taking this role. She doesn't seem too afraid of anything truly bad happening, and instead, again, seems to think she's part of the cure or solution. And so I can only guess she's talking about one of two things here, one of which being online harassment or hate. And yes, that has happened to some extent to others before her who look like her, if you will. Though it's always difficult to know just how many people are partaking in it and where it's exactly coming from. Which isn't to say it's not an issue or should be ignored. Even one person doing that is too many people doing that. But to be blunt, you can't get a few hundred people attacking you online and then condemn millions upon millions of Star Wars fans as being a dangerous community. I mean, I don't want to compare myself to her or compare our situations or anything like that, but even me, someone who has achieved a little more than a tiny iota of notoriety in the grand scheme of things, even I have haters and people who have, even sent me death threats or told me to go kill myself or wished horrible things upon my wife, for example. And it's been done over Star Wars or related issues. In other words, there are some bad apples out there, especially on the internet. Which again isn't me trying to in any way excuse their actions or say it's not a big deal. I'm certainly not cool with the people who have said horrible things to me. Nor do I want to say it just comes with the territory, but it does just come with the territory in a way. People who don't like you for whatever reason or who just want to troll for the sake of trolling, they're going to attack you where you're the most vulnerable, where they know they can hurt you, and so that's exactly what they do. And so if she has experienced anything of the sort, I do empathize and feel bad for her. Or if she's in any way made to feel uncomfortable as a quote-unquote black nerd, I also feel for her. I think that's wrong, and I do think that's probably the word she was looking for, uncomfortable, or just sort of unwelcomed. But I don't think it's the fan base that's being unwelcoming. If you're a real Star Wars fan, you don't care what the other person looks like. You're just happy to share your fandom with them. For example, and it's just my own life experience, so take it or leave it for what it is. But in my days, I have gone to many, let's call them geek events. Be they Gen Con, which I used to go to every single year before it moved out of Milwaukee in the early 2000s, and damn you, Indianapolis for stealing it. To other gaming and comic book conventions of all sizes, to even Magic the Gathering tournaments across the country. I spent a good couple years in my early 20s heavily involved in that game and going to all sorts of tournaments, driving to them with my friends and having an absolute blast. And I will certainly acknowledge, especially the further back you go, like back to the late 90s and early 2000s when I was much younger with less responsibilities and had more time to do that sort of thing, they were predominantly white male crowds or player bases. But here's the thing, there were always some who didn't fall into that category. There have always been quote-unquote black nerds out there. And again, this is just my observation. You're free to give me your own stories in the comments below if you're a black nerd or any other color for that matter. Tell me what your experiences have been. But they always looked like they felt welcomed at these events, dare I say even very comfortable, simply because they were with people who liked the same things and didn't give a damn about the color of their skin. And from the few black nerds I got to know and played Magic with back in the day, and yes, they were few and far between, I always got the impression from them, though I don't want to put words in their mouth or anything like that, but I always got the impression that there was a stigma around them liking this sort of thing from, let's say, their own community. Not from the card-playing or geek community they wanted to be a part of. That was just not something they were supposed to enjoy, was the impression I got from them. Not that they felt like they were being excluded by, again, the community they wanted to be a part of. And as someone who still, from time to time, goes to these type of geek events, who recently started playing a new trading card game called Flesh and Blood, and has traveled to a few events here and there, it's great to now see, to use that word, it's great to see far more diversity amongst the player base. I'm truly glad to see this silly belief start to shatter that sci-fi and fantasy is only for white guys. And the reason why some white guys may take issue with what Amanda Lestenberg said, or with this recent push for more diversity, is that it tends to get framed in a way that puts blame on white men for keeping everyone else out. Like they weren't wanted here and they have to break the door down and we'll find a hostile opponent behind it once they're in. When in all reality, the door's always been wide open for everyone and anyone to join, and we're happy to welcome you to the world of really cool geeky shit. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. Tell me if you think sci-fi and fantasy and that sort of thing has somehow been hostile to anyone besides white men who want to partake in it, or if there's another side to this story. Whatever you do think, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.